Shalom, live lesson from brother doing morning news and prophecy. So we'll watch his video a little and we'll just get into this. First and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakadash. Double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, where it teaches us truth and sincerity, day in, day out. Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakadash, Brakatam. So, here it is, live. Get this while you still can, while we're still able to do live lessons, and in-home lessons, and on the street.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS, who rule well, teach well, being great examples to his young brothers. And peace and blessings and salutation to the hopeful lake out there pushing his word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem, Rakakadash, pushing to get up out of the Shalom to the hopeful lake, the believers, the listeners, whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai. All right, and what we're going to get into this morning, all right, this morning's news and prophecy. A World War III update, okay, and the death and the food, man. You can see from the the thumbnail, I could have called this lesson missiles and Taco Bell. You see, but just to go into some things, what's happening, dealing with how this back and forth, it's been 10 days of America and Iran, going back and forth, and just to go into how things are going. I know you brothers, been hearing about the news about, American troops, okay, are being targeted in the region, all right, and what we have to understand, ever since the funeral of Ayatollah, all right, Khamenei, the last supreme leader of Iran, well, now his son's era is in full effect. You see, because the funeral of the last supreme leader of Iran, well, that marked the beginning of the era of the son. All right, Mashtaba, and we see, he's gunning for American troops in the region. And not just destroying the bases themselves. They're gunning for troops. And see, just like we spoke about in the beginning of this back and forth, what Iran was doing, which they were softening up, okay? They were softening it up, and they was opening it up. I say they was opening it up for them to be able to get missiles through undetected. Okay, that's why first thing that they did, they first moved, okay, was destroy radars, destroy missile defenses, okay, destroy aircraft, okay, because a part of the air defense is the Air Force itself. So Iran has opened up their region, and basically a lot of those areas are blind now, because those radars would alert those bases that you had incoming missiles early. You will have those soldiers will have time to evacuate, okay? But now what we're seeing is their warning time has been disabled because they killed a lot of those radars. So now those soldiers don't have, hours notice, okay, or 30, 20 minutes notice. You see? Now, because I think in Israel, the small hats, it got down to, they was getting like 30-second notice, 5-minute notice, okay? That's why people in the last exchange, when it was intense between the small hats and Iran, you had people had to live in the bunkers, okay? Because they did used to have enough warning to where they could, get to their nearest bunker from their house. But when Iran destroyed the radars, the Israeli people on small hats, okay, they had to live in the bunkers, man, because there wasn't enough warning time for them to get from, their house to their nearest bunker. Okay, and you see, they ain't pinched Iran this go around, okay, because they call him. You see, so now what we're seeing is this escalation, okay, between Iran and America. To now, Iran has escalated to targeting American troops, okay, and it only gets worse from here. Now let's get some precepts because I want to get this and go into some words. So when you go to the book of Jeremiah, which you go into, we're going to get some words. When you go into the book of Jeremiah, chapter 50, okay, in verse 22, it says, the noise of the battle in the land and the noise of great destruction. Okay, because what we're hearing, what we're seeing, okay, is there's a theme. Now, if you're gonna get this video, all right, of missiles. You see, now they're looking at the American military, and instead of trying to match, okay, America fighter jet for fighter jet, okay, aircraft carrier for aircraft carrier. Now these nations see, you know, the way to go with missiles, man. You see, and it's going to go from conventional missiles to eventually nukes. You see, and we know we're waiting, you know, for the devil, you know, to roll out more of this new world order and get to the point to where, you know, he's going to mandate they see it before it goes nuclear. Okay, but these nations are starting to trend toward these missiles, man. Okay, when you get verse 23, it says, "How was the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder and broken? How was Babylon become a desolation among the nations?" You see, so how is the hammer? This is the question being posed, and we're seeing the hammer being broken. Okay, for a time, America was the hammer of the earth. You see, but now, all right, because you can look at it. Because how do most hammers break? You know, by what? It being used all the time. Okay, and America's military has been used, you know, just for decades straight. After World War II, American military has been, you know, throughout the earth, just hammering and bullying nations, man. Okay, and how do hammers often break? From overuse. You get to the point to where it's used out, and you use that last swing and it breaks. Okay, so now America is hitting up against something that it can't bully, it can't push around. Okay, and it's gonna be broken, and ultimately it's gonna be how it's shot. It's gonna shatter it, man. Okay, along with these other nations. Now, when you go into how the hammer of the whole earth cut asunder, because you go into the word asunder, which in the Hebrew is gadah. Now you say how the hammer cut asunder. Remember the word asunder. So in Hebrew is gadah, and it says what? To be cut, to be hewn, to chop down. Okay, to cut off, to cut into two. Okay, to chop down or to hewn down. You see, and what we're going to see is this American military constantly be hewn down, be chopped down. Okay, it said to destroy anything. All right. Now, when you get because this precept made me think. Let's get this word broken, and then we're going to go into another precept, going to the word asunder. Okay. When you go to the word broken, how is the hammer of the earth cut asunder and broken? Okay, how's it going to be hewn down? Which Hebrew word is right shabar. Shabar in Hebrew, which means what? To break in pieces. Okay, to rend violently, to crush. Okay, to be crippled. You see, and what we're seeing with Iran, they're crippling America's military. All right, they're crippling America's ability to project power in their region. Okay, and they're softening it up for, all right, the kings of the east to come forth. Okay, they're softening it up for the kings of the east, you know, to come forth and fulfill prophecy, man. You see, Ezekiel 38. Okay, so what we're seeing is the Lord dismantling the empire. You know, it's not a random conflict. No, this is prophecy. The Lord is dismantling the empire. Okay, now Esau, the elites, they have their agenda of a global reset, but the Lord agenda, okay, is to dismantle, all right, this whole thing, the new world order and everything. Okay, see, the elites want to bring the American people to their knees, okay, and usher them into this new world order. But the Lord wants to destroy America completely and destroy this whole Edomite empire that runs the earth, man. Okay, so we're watching the Heavenly Father dismantle an empire. Now let's go from there. You get that word asunder, you know, because you think, all right, when you go, let's go here. And when you go into the word asunder, it makes me think of this precept in the book of 2nd Ezra chapter 6. Okay, about, you know, Babylon being cut asunder. Well, let's go here. 2nd Ezra 6 and 7 says, "Then answered I and said, what shall be the part and asunder of the times, or when shall be the end of the first, and the beginning of it that followeth?" Now, Ezra's asking about the kingdom. Okay, he asking about what shall be the part asunder. You see, but then you go to Jeremiah 50 and 23, how the hammer of the earth cut asunder and broken. Okay, showing you that it's going to be this war that's going to be the part and asunder of the times. It's going to separate the age, okay, of Esau, okay, and the age of Jacob. You see, this war is going to separate the times. Okay, it's going to cut asunder the times. You see, because what he said in 2, from Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. Okay? Letting you know what that our rulership, okay, will be transitioning in as Esau's rulership is transitioning out. Esau was on the way out the door. Okay? Esau is on his way out, and he's going to cause a lot of damage, you know, to the world on his way out, mainly here in America. All right, because America got to get caught up to get on board, you know, for this short-lived, okay, enterprise of his new world order. You see, but Esau was on the way out, and he's going to do a lot of damage, especially here in America with the American citizens, man. Okay.
Yep. And we're beginning to see that as new draconian laws are coming in, and everything is centered around the MOTB, which is mostly dealing with Babylon. Yes, it's going to be a worldwide event that pretty much most of the world is going to be chipped. However, the penalty for taking the chip is those still here in Babylon, because Apostle Tahar was getting into this yesterday. If you watched his video, you know, and he was saying, look, man, yeah, those in Spain that might have taken the chip, or, you know, in Sweden and some of the other areas that weren't hit with nuclear missiles, yeah, the Most High is not going to kill the whole earth, but because we still got to have slaves, etc., right? So we're still going to round them up. But either way, they're going to still serve slavery, you know, and like everything else, so, you know, not everybody in the whole world, per se, is going to be judged for taking that. They're going to be judged anyways, but as far as the judgment of being cast into the lake of fire is specific to those in Babylon. Now, like everything else, though, not saying that, oh, yeah, you can just go take the MOTB and then go over to England or go over to somewhere else and be considered safe, but yet at the same time, yeah, you might be. You're still going to be rounded up in slavery, but if you're a Jake, however, yeah, I can see where this is coming from, you know, but like everything else, don't take the MOTB, which is the RFID, ultimately at the end of the day, whether you're on this side of the world or the other. But the main judgment is coming to Babylon the Great, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it destroyed. We're seeing Iran just totally wiping out the troops because, like everything else, though, Jordan themselves, the Jordanians, actually helped Iran as well, providing intelligence. Why? Because these nations are angry and they want them out. The Jordanian citizens, you know, who does not like the government that's in there, actually helped Iran, provided intelligence to Iran to wipe out the U.S. terrorists there. They want them out of Syria too. They want them out of Iraq. You know, they're tired of the U.S. presence there. They want a new, you know, West Asia. And they want a new broker there. And that broker is going to be Gog and Magog. You see how everything's being transitioned towards that. And like everything else, though, here's another big thing. Seeing that, okay, the main judgment of the MOTB is here in Babylon with this Genius Act. So, like everything else, so stable coins, cause and all, you know, we're here. We're here in this time that he's going to usher in the RFID system because ultimately his economy is destroyed, but going to have a new digital economy, better known as the stable coin, and, you know, the only way to get on it is to get the chip. And ultimately, that's going to lead to being cast alive in the lake of fire, meaning you're going to be left here. Ain't no chariot going to rescue your ass if you took the chip. You know, the only way out of here is through the chariots. You ain't escaping Babylon's destruction unless you do manage to get on a flight to Australia or somewhere else that ain't being bombed by nuclear weapons. Yeah, how many can really afford that? Only the rich are going to really escape, but they're going to serve slavery anyways. U.S. agencies missed Genius Act deadline, extending stablecoin uncertainty. Well, that was done on purpose, because like everything else, though, stablecoin is just another way of tracking your every move. U.S. regulatory agencies missed the rulemaking deadline under the guiding and establishing national innovation for U.S. stablecoins. Genius Act on Saturday, which marked 1 year since the law was signed. So it's into law, and it's already there. So it's basically unchecked, meaning that they can do whatever they want with it. The Genius Act established the first comprehensive federal regulatory framework for stablecoins in the U.S. Act was signed into law by U.S. President Trump on the 18th of July, 2025. Well, no wonder why. I mean, got all this war going on. You got Trump talking about elections. Who gives a fuck when this place is on its way out? You know, it's really retarded. You know, and those that follow Trump are real retards. Well, Esau's always been a dumb fucking dummy, and I remember some of the earlier teachers, in One West, man, and he said it. You're a bunch of cave dwellers, because that's what Caucasian means, cave dwellers, and you cave dwellers, man, that's pretty much it. You think that you can just go hide in your bunkers when the bombs come, but guess what, though? You're still going to be taken out one by one. The next phase of shrinkflation, rolling blackouts, yeah, it's coming. They're going to do it. Thomas Edison, with major funding from J.P. Morgan, roughly spent 2 years building the first ever commercial power plant located in Manhattan's financial district. A little history there. Its total capacity was about 600 kilowatts, barely enough to power a single rack of GPUs today. But all the time, it was nothing short of miraculous. However, though, now that you're talking about those data centers and all that, at the turn of the 20th century, hardly anyone had electricity in their homes. By 1920, it was about 35%. By the time the Great Depression hit in 1929, it was roughly 70% of U.S. homes were electrified, and urban areas were nearly 85%. So it hasn't even been 100 years yet that 70%, of people having power. Yeah, they make it a law that if you lose power, they can just kick you out. At least that's here in California. Probably there in most states. That if you didn't pay your electric bill, they could kick you out for that because it's, quote, unsafe. Yeah, even though, you paid your rent and everything, but if you didn't pay your electric bill, they can kick you out. It's the same as not paying your rent. Blackouts are not infrequent, but they were generally short and localized, often just affected a few street or houses. But now, in short, they planned for speed and scale, not resilience, and at the end result was an incredibly complex network that was highly vulnerable to system failure. So, like everything else, though, you expect to see rolling blackouts very soon because you already know that these data centers are sucking all the energy, and they have to steal the energy from the regular people that live in their homes. So things are going to get very uncomfortable. See, that's another thing. If there's blackouts everywhere, how the fuck are we going to be able to upload our street lessons? How are we going to upload any lessons for that matter if it's all blacked out? That's another thing that's going to cause the famine of the word right there, when you don't even have the power to actually get online to actually post anything because you have no power. AIPAC blacklists dozens of U.S. lawmakers that back cutting military aid to no Israel. So guess what? Now unrestrictively, right? Aid's going into the Israeli state, which is bankrupt and everything else. So you see how that works, right? The punitive measure comes as U.S. public opinion of the Israeli state hits historic lows. And like everything else, these Edomites, they're telling on themselves, right? Because they know that their leadership ain't for them. It's for the small hats, for the Amalekites. So, shameful spewing on Esau's glory, right? Because the glory of kingdoms, mystery Babylon. Yeah, they're finding out it's not Babylon first. It's not America first. It's not MAGA. It's Israeli state first. And guess what? They don't have the interest of the people. So, nothing but shameful spewing on his glory, his kingdom. Because glory is another term for kingdom. So like everything else, though, we're seeing the downfall of Esau Edom, which is Babylon, and ultimately just Babylon being cut off from everything. Now they can cut off their soldiers. Iran knows how to do it. Why? Because the nations are tired of Babylon. They want the whore burned with fire. They want to see it destroyed. So you expect more casualties to continue to pile in. On with the body count.
Alright. Shalom. Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai, Barak the Yahweh, Barak the Yahushai, Call Elohim Ra, Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai, Bahashim, Makah, Kodash, Ilwan, so Apostle, El's Great Millstone, Shalom to the Hopeful Lake, this is what he called from GMS Cleveland Camp, what will and listen. And this is Habakkuk 2 in verse 16. It says, Thou art filled with shame for glory. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. The cup of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushai's right hand, shall be turned unto thee, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. And that's going to be the highlight of the lesson. I'm going to give some little other precepts, a little bit of the spirit, but that's going to be the focus of the lesson is going to be on this verse right here. Because Shameful spewings upon Esau Edom's glory. Esau Edom is who? The so-called white man. That's what he called himself. The so-called British man, the so-called European man, the so-called American man, the so-called Jewish man, okay, the so-called German man, all these different false identities and other aliases that Esau Edom has named himself to hide who he truly is, which is what? Esau Edom, Idunia, okay, the devil, the enemy of the Heavenly Father, the enemy of the chosen people, and really the enemy of life, okay? And I got a whole these things to go over right here. I got my lesson playlist about, about this shameful spewing. I'm going to start right here. Wait, I'm sorry, where's that? Right here. Yeah, it says, there's a history. I might have mentioned this before. I don't think I ever did an actual lesson on it solely, but we mentioned here about what the British, the Esau was calling himself British, okay? It was when the seven heads was, what he was doing, okay, to the Chinese, man. India, he had the occupation of India to the Edomites, all right? So, and that's I got a lot of comments, and the vibration of the earth is not good for Esau Edom. The so-called white man is being called out for his crimes. All throughout history, he's always the bad guy, all right? And all these different, even in the recent wars, he's always painted himself through his media, like brothers say, we laugh about here in Cleveland, Esau Edom, he got the coldest PR campaign. He's in the movies. He's Captain America. He's James Bond. He's Superman. He's trying to save the world behind the scenes. And no, man, you're not, in real life, you're not the hero, man. In real life, Esau Edom, the so-called white man, he's the villain that the world needs saving from. And who's that savior? Yahushua, man. Who the world enemy calls Jesus Christ. Yahushua Mashiach, the so-called black man, the Messiah. Okay, he's coming back to stop this devil in his tracks, man. Okay. But again, Esau Edom, he always has his campaign and propaganda that he's the hero in all these wars. He's always the hero, but that's not the case, man. Okay, and Yahweh Shai, the vibration he has out here, starting with, of course, the prophets. Okay, starting with our elders, apostles, and going back to their elders, they're all going all the way back to our Bivens in the street corners and teaching and preaching, bringing out the scriptures directly and correctly. Okay, people are seeing that now. The vibration of the earth is no longer seeing Esau as this spotless, holy, this wouldn't hurt a fly creature. No. This is the devil. This is the most violent man that's ever been. Let's go ahead and get started to this. Well, when it's edifying, like I said, if more precepts come to the spirit, I grab. I already got a couple in mind, but again, I'm mainly highlighting. I'm going to bring that. I'm not going to bring that again. This is actually going to highlight. This is what the main topic of this lesson is going to be. Habakkuk 2:16. Thou art filled with shame for glory. So what Esau Edom used to boast in, used to be glorified, and now it's being to his shame, man. All right, we're going to talk about the establishing of America. All right, let's see one of these clips. Jake was pressing this devil, man. There's one Edomite. He was up there trying to talk about the so-called in the UK they call it a migrant rape crisis, where they fear so-called delicate white women being raped by the Somalian immigrants and shit like that. But it's like, bro, like who you have gone through the earth raping all the women of all the races? What are you talking about? You are the most violent rape, robbery, murder person on the earth. Like you're the most violent criminal, but yet he always got his hand pointed at everybody else. Everybody else is a terrorist. Everybody else is a criminal. Everybody else you got to lock your doors when he come past, and everybody else is a rapist and thief. But besides the one who's the biggest rapist and thief, all right. So again. Drink thou also, and let thy foreskin be uncovered. Right, Esau's history, his hidden history is being brought out. He's being ashamed about it, and some of it's not even hidden. He used to boast in it, but now he's trying to take it out the books, man. All right, that's what he had. Critical race theory. All right, what the Edomites complaining and calling it a theory when you simply just go into secular history and bring out the atrocities that these Edomites have done. All right. It says, the cup of Yahweh's right hand shall be turned unto thee. Right, the cup of the Lord's wrath. You can read that in Isaiah the 51st chapter. It says, and shameful spewing shall be on thy glory. So Esau's being put to shame, man. So let's get straight into it. Like I said, I don't know if I'm going to hit everything in here. If I do got a couple things. How much I got here? I might not bring all this out, but let's get straight to it. It says, Britain deliberately addicted an entire nation to drugs, then went to war when China tried to stop it. This is the story they don't teach in school, right? They don't teach this history in the fucking school system, right? And I see these comments again, thousands of likes, right? It says, they claim to be the most civilized people on the earth, right? They is called Esau Edom, so-called white man. Never heard good history about the British government, always doing some atrocious, heinous crimes in history. And again, when you go to Revelation, one of the seven heads of the beast, okay, is what? It's talking about Britain, okay? So again, continuing on this slideshow, it says, in the 1800s, Britain was obsessed with Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. But China didn't want anything Britain was selling. Britain was bleeding silver and needed a solution. You see, so again, they didn't want to like barter so-called in trade. Like, no, you got to buy this, man, because we don't want anything you got, right? So again, Esau Edom, he always want to push like he's the superior race and all this shit, but he's always into other races of culture, not just Israelites, but even the heathen. Ammon, Moab, and Chinese, Japanese, Edomites, again, Issachar, the Mexican. Whenever you go to these different restaurants geared to that by these races, like I said, whether it's Issachar, the Mexican restaurant, whether it's Elam in the so-called East Indian Mediterranean restaurant, right? It's always Esau in there. There is no like race of so-called white people food. Because even the Italians that they're trying to go to, it's really Jake. Because a lot of the Italians are really Israelites, man. They go back to Israelites. So you think Esau is going to create all these different signature Italian dishes? Fuck no. All right? He doesn't have this. Esau Edom, his signature food as a race is fucking McDonald's, man. All right? This dude don't have no signature food. Again, he's so superior. If he was really so superior, why isn't everybody going to, again, the fact you can't even think of one. Like I said, that's the only thing they was trying to say, well, Italian this. Nigga, that's Jake, bro. Okay? But you can't even, besides that misconception they have, there is no like food you can think about like that so-called white men make. All right? Yeah, like even the barbecue, he's probably known for throwing barbecues and making good ass food on the grill. All right? But again, he's so superior, but he got to go to everybody else for food, though, right? It says the 1800s, Britain was obsessed with Chinese tea, silk, and porcelain. But China didn't want anything Britain was selling. Britain was bleeding silver and needed a solution. It says their solution? Opium. grown in British-controlled India, smuggled into China by the millions of pounds. By the 1830s, 12 million Chinese were addicted. You see again, and it's the same play. This is
Yeah,
the same
who's
shit he
the
did
narco-terrorist?
man. Getting them addicted to fucking crack cocaine. Okay, that's the same shit he did, man. Bro, literally that crack era generation. Okay, that's the same thing he did. This was back in the 1830s. He did this shit. But again, this same devil today has the nerve to point to the Israelite men as the biggest drug dealers in the world. When Jacobs is simply fucking, even the cartels, the Southern and Northern Kingdom, they're literally just pawns to Esau's bigger scheme. They're literally puzzles on the chessboard. They're pieces on the chessboard, right? Just like guys like Pablo Escobar, once Esau's done with you, he comes and murders you, okay? So again, their solution, opium.
Yeah,
grown
they're
in British-controlled
expendable.
India, smuggled into China by the millions of pounds. By the 1830s, 12 million Chinese were addicted. So again, this is the real drug dealer right here.
Yep.
It says
the
China's
real
emperor had enough.
narco-terrorist.
Commissioner Lin Zexu seized 1,400 tons of opium from British traders and destroyed it all. He even wrote a letter to the Queen Victoria asking her to stop. She never replied. Again, this is the civilized history, right? This is the great so-called white man purposely addicted the nation to drugs, man. Well, enslaving one nation, they weren't in super hardcore slavery like we were in child slavery, but occupying a country, India, and forcing them to work and make drugs, right? It says Britain's response, they sent warships. The first Opium War began in 1839. China with medieval weapons stood no chance against British warships. So again, here it is. Again, Esau talking all this shit about the third world and how other nations aren't developed. He never wants to address his major role in history, in recent history and far history, on him putting their boot to them and their foot on their neck and keeping them in the lower state. Here their emperor trying to solve the drug problem, and you're really going to war with them for trying to stop the drug problem. But Esau, he got the so-called war on drugs, right? It says China lost badly. The Treaty of Nanking forced China to pay massive reparations. So you got to pay money to this devil because he came and started a war with you because you wanted
They
drugs.
lost Hong Kong right there.
Look at these devils. These are the civilized, the great so-called white man right here, right? Who wouldn't hurt a fly. And all the other races, the black man, the Arab man, the East Indian man, the Chinese, the Japanese, they're all just barbaric savages, right? They're uncivilized. But these men right here who are literally going to war with you because you're stopping you putting fucking drugs in your country, they're the civilized one though, right? It says they had to pay massive reparations, hand over Hong Kong, so you stole their land, open 5 ports to British trade. Oh, you're gonna force us to fucking trade with you, and let the drug trade continue. So we are forced. Bro, man, this is the devil, man. And this is why you read Isaiah 14 chapter. Let me go to it. When you go Isaiah 14 chapter, this whole chapter is good, man. This is Isaiah 14:4. This is when Yahushua comes back and stops this devil, right? It says that thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, how hath the oppressor ceased? The golden city ceased. The golden city is what? Babylon the Great, which you people know is North America. The oppressor is Esau, Edom. The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked. The staff represents power. And the scepter also represents power of the rulers, right? So the Lord's going to break the power of this devil, man. His military might will be destroyed. Verse 6, he who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke, he that ruleth the nations in anger is persecuted and none hindereth. So again, Esau never let up, man. Esau, even the so-called white boy, he never fucking let up. He continued his rape, robbery, murder, and oppression. And then he speaks proudly, like Psalm 73 chapter says. They speak proudly concerning oppression.
Just listen to Donald Trump.
This motherfucker will oppress you, force you to allow him to keep selling drugs in your country, and then will point at your country and say, see, they're uncivilized. That's why their country has a drug problem. It has nothing to do with me forcing them to allow it. No, it has nothing to do with that.
Yep, and shoots at fishermen's boats and says that, oh, they're narco-terrorists, when the greatest narco-terrorist himself is Esau. But, you know, you can catch Resident Brothers lesson, Shameful Spew on Esau's glory. You know him, GMS Kingdom Minded. He has it on here on Odyssey, and he's on YouTube, all kinds of places, right, that you can find him, right? But wait, there's more. You know, I got another one here. Trump does disaster landing to D.C. as plans collapse. Yeah, they totally collapsed. So we'll just get into this.
Donald Trump has gone silent since it was revealed that multiple U.S. service members were tragically killed in the Middle East as a result of Trump's escalation in this unlawful and catastrophic war in Iran. Donald Trump has not made any social media posts in the past 24 hours. He has not given any public interviews in the past 24 hours. He has not publicly addressed the fact that multiple U.S. service members have been killed in this war recently. Also, we know that dozens of U.S. service members have been injured.
Last year he said that's just the way that it is. Or earlier this year, he says that's just the way that it is.
Multiple U.S. military bases were hit hard by Iran. U.S. military equipment, helicopters, drones destroyed by Iran's counterstrikes. No public statements by Donald Trump. In fact, yesterday he was in Bedminster, his luxury golf course. He was holding a fundraiser. He was spending time with the right-wing oligarchs.
Everybody's
he was hiding from the press. In fact, he called a lid. He kicked out the press. He was potentially going to speak with the press, and then it was uncovered that there were these multiple U.S. service member fatalities, so he kicked out the press. I'll show you what state regime media, which calls itself Fox News, said when it was discovered that there were these U.S. service member fatalities, and then Trump kicked out the press yesterday. Here, let's play this clip.
He had argued that this was for the future. We heard him last month during the ceasefire say that if service members were killed, it would end the ceasefire. Again, that ceasefire is no longer in effect. So the White House has just called a lid, meaning we do not expect to see or hear the president make any public appearances for the rest of the day. However, I have met some people here in Bridgewater who say that they are attending a black tie summer bash at Bedminster. It is worth noting that the president does hold fundraisers throughout different weekends at many of his facilities. John.
So we have some photos of Donald Trump at his Bedminster Luxury Golf Club yesterday.
Who gives a fuck stuff, right?
Being killed. We have photos of Paul Ingrassia, Paolo Zampoli, that's who introduced Donald Trump to Melania at the Kit Kat Club in the late 1990s. And his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child, says that she knows about Melania's dark past and Trump's dark past. That's him right there. He's like an ambassador.
Yep, the pedophile.
Their thumbs up. Their thumbs up while all of this is going on. Also, you did hear a public statement from Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary. He said, "Godspeed, heroes. Their sacrifice only stiffens our resolve," in response to the news that multiple U.S. service members were killed at an air base in Jordan. Notably, CENTCOM had previously put out a statement after those service members were killed, and CENTCOM should have known that those service members were killed. And the CENTCOM statement was, "No U.S. troops in the region have been recently killed or captured."
Like snow.
And that was in response to Iran saying that there were U.S. troops killed in Syria and in the region, and CENTCOM said absolutely false. Now, the last time Donald Trump spoke publicly was at Trump Tower. We have footage of what went down there. That was when he was speaking with Gianni Infantino, the head of FIFA, and Donald Trump, while he was escalating the war, before we knew about those, although we suspected on the Midas Touch Network there were fatalities, but before it was publicly reported, just so you can get a sense of where Donald Trump was speaking in the Trump Tower and how everything he does is fake. Like, this is the public relations, this is the press room that he kind of manufactured, just so you can see what it looks like for yourself. Here, play this clip. Now we're getting additional footage of what went down at the Muwafiq Salti Air Base in the Iranian counterstrike that killed those U.S. troops. Let me just show you some of the footage of the Iranian strikes. Now, we showed you some of that footage the other day when we suspected here that that's what took place, but let me show you the footage for yourself. Play this clip.
Direct hit.
And then this open source intelligence accounts did a side-by-side where you can see video from inside and outside of the Muwafiq Salti Air Base at the moment 2 ballistic missile impacts took place on July 17th. Here you can see it for yourself. And this resulted in multiple U.S. service members being killed. And I'm saying multiple because I still don't believe the CENTCOM number they publicly reported to. We believe that number, of course, is increasing. And we believe the seriously injured, that number is being covered up as well. But here, let's play this clip.
So you see, their own are telling on them. Got a lot of whistleblowers amongst Edom. They cannot hide themselves.
Now, the Iranian army also published a video of their drones that were launching towards the various U.S. military bases yesterday and the day before. And Iran has been able to strike bases in Kuwait, in Jordan, in Iraq, Erbil, in Qatar, in Oman, in Bahrain, in all of the surrounding Arab nations, in Saudi Arabia. Just let's play this clip. Now here's video of an Iranian Shahed 136 hitting its target in the Iraqi Kurdistan region. Let's play this clip. And you can see the U.S. CRAM systems active over Erbil in Iraq with reports of explosions. Play this clip.
They couldn't stop Iran back in 2020 when they retaliated for Soleimani's death, which Trump caused military men to get killed. That was just the beginning.
One of the things we're learning is CENTCOM is very worried that the Patriot interceptors and its systems are really not capable of stopping the Iranian ballistic missiles and the Iranian drones at this point. We know that the U.S. has gone through a lot of its munitions, but even where it has some PAC-3 or these THAAD interceptors, Iran's been able to calibrate its ballistic missiles in ways that these U.S. Patriot interceptors are really struggling to strike down the movement and the patterns of the Iranian ballistic missiles. And maybe the interception rate is like 10-15% right now. And so these Iranian ballistic missiles have been able to, kind of strike with impunity at this point. And Iran's clearly found big vulnerabilities in the U.S. air bases in Jordan, and that's why Iran's been really focused on hitting Jordan, where they see a lot of vulnerabilities. And there are multiple air bases and other U.S. bases in Jordan that Iran has been targeting, and we've been sharing with you some of those over the past week or so as well. Should be noted that the State Department had to issue this worldwide caution notice right now.
Yep.
The Department of State has advised Americans worldwide exercise
as of
increased
yesterday.
caution no matter where you are in the world.
Or 2 days ago, rather.
Donald Trump as your president at this point. Oil prices, the price of crude, has gone up 20% or so in the past several days. We believe that that'll be over $90 a barrel when the markets open, may even approach $100 a barrel. Strait of Hormuz remains shut down. Iran, in response, so the U.S. has been striking all of these bridges, civilian infrastructure surrounding Bandar Abbas. I've been covering how it looks like the U.S. is prepping the terrain for a potential ground invasion. Basically, cut off Bandar Abbas and cut off the coast of Iran from the rest of Iran. That's why the U.S. is destroying. The U.S. is engaged in all of these war crimes. They're destroying the bridges and the tunnels. The U.S. also hit two desalination facilities. Iran responded by striking two desalination facilities in Kuwait. 90% of the drinking water, more of the drinking water, comes from these desalination facilities. So they're really reaching a tipping point there. In the Middle East, Iran has demonstrated its ability to counterstrike very, very hard. Clearly, when Donald Trump said that Iran doesn't have its weapons anymore and we destroyed all of its weapons, they don't have its radar. Remember back in March, they don't have anything. That's the furthest from the truth.
Yep, exactly. And like everything else, though, the whistle's being blown on them that it's a lot worse than what they're telling you, and the people are going to be pissed off. That's why they say that in 2 Ezra chapter 15, they shall not regard the kings or princes. Why? Because they're sick of being lied to. And you're going to see mutinies too. Guaranteed, a lot of people in the service are going to have mutinies against that. You can see a lot of them will surrender. Especially once you get into the ground war, and they have actually done their landings into Iran, they'll just surrender to Iran. If they even make it that far. I don't think they're going to make it that far, with the way that it's looking. But like everything else, though, Most High has a plan. Ultimately, Esau is going to lose. His number is up. U.S. planning wider war with Iran. D.C. is likely unaware it lacks the resources needed for extended military campaign. American official has told the paper. This warning comes as Pentagon confirmed that at least 4 service members have been killed. That's still keeping it low. After Iranian forces launched retaliatory strikes against American military facilities in the region. According to New York Times, the U.S. forces were hit by Iranian missile and drone attacks several times over the past week. Yeah, it's a lot worse than that. So they put the worldwide caution, U.S. issues worldwide travel warning, as you saw in the previous video. So here we go. Yet they're saying that there's going to be a ceasefire. Right. Mediators float 10-day ceasefire. Peshkin tells citizens Iran engaged in full-scale war. Yeah, exactly. Iran's ready to fight. They're tired of all this stalling. It's on. Iranian authorities have said at least 50 people were killed and more than 500 injured after the return to war in the last 3 weeks. So, like everything else, 50 is a far cry from floor, isn't it? State media reported that 8 were killed in a single bridge strike on Friday. American deaths have become evident as well. Okay, that's who was killed on Iran's side, Slovakia. But American deaths have become evident as well, with U.S. soldiers confirmed killed in a Saturday CENTCOM announcement. Pentagon said on Sunday a 3rd serviceman was killed in northern Iraq Sunday. So they're still really downplaying. They're downplaying it, and they are gaslighting big time. But you can see that the alternative media is showing you what's happening. That's why I like getting videos from Midas Touch, because he actually gets a lot of information for right now. I'm sure Kim Iverson has had it, but I just haven't seen a lot of her videos within the last few days. But well, I'm pretty sure she'll be back on there again. But Midas Touch seems to be getting the videos right now as far as the war. This war is good. It's good to see Babylon the Great finally losing. U.S. deploying additional warplanes to West Asia as it prepares to escalate the war against Iran. Times report that U.S. F-16 fighter jets based in Germany and F-35 jets from bases in the UK were being sent to the region. This report comes after U.S. terrorists were killed by Iranian missile strike against the base in Jordan, but officials said the deployment was planned before, that President Trump was signing plans to escalate before those deaths. Well, of course, that's why he's been very quiet. The U.S. has been planning for a wider war. U.S. official familiar with the administration's internal discussions told Washington Post. The official acknowledged that the U.S. wasn't in the best position to escalate due to the depletion of air defenses and other munitions. So in other words, they can't really keep the war going. You know, good luck trying to land there because they're ready. Iran says 2 tankers explode in Hormuz choke point as ship traffic near standstill. Visible maritime traffic through the Hormuz choke point remains subdued this week after Iranian forces targeted tankers attempted to transit the narrow waterway, including routes close to Oman. This comes as the U.S. and Iran have been locked in tit-for-tat escalation that has entered its 9th day. So like everything else, so they still try to keep on taking those illegal routes and keep getting caught by Iran. Iran thanks Jordanians for help targeting the U.S. terrorists. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps thanked the Jordanian citizens and military personnel for allegedly providing accurate intelligence it used to strike the U.S. terrorists and aircraft stationed in the kingdom. So some of the Jordanian military also called Iran. Hey, they're providing intelligence. You know why? They're fucking sick of Esau there. They want him out. But the U.S. won't ever leave Iraq, Syria, or Jordan, or any of these places. They're fucking sick of it. So this is their best revenge, to go ahead and tell Iran where they're at. You see how the enemy's getting chased off? You see how they're coming together? That they're coming together? That, you know, if their own military is providing intelligence to Iran, what does that tell you? That the governments will have no choice but to agree with the military that's with them. You see? And that's going to create a whole coalition against Babylon the Great. And it's forcing them to retreat into the Israeli state, which it looks like Iran is saving them for last. Saving the best for last. In a statement carried by Teshem on Monday, IRGC claimed ballistic missiles targeted C-17 military transport aircraft, so the C-17s have been taken out, and P-8 command and control planes at Al-Quds Airport in southern Jordan. During its latest round of retaliatory strikes, several of the aircraft suffered heavy damage, according to the statement. So, yeah, Trump resorts to whataboutism after Iranian strike kills. In other words, he fails to acknowledge it. Of course, denial, right? Or just gaslight the people, because he's good at that. U.S. strikes target military, civilian, and nuclear sites in Iran as Tehran expands attacks across the region. Yeah, just continue to go after infrastructure, you know, like this bridge that they knocked out. United States launched new wave of strikes against Iran, including military and civilian sites, as well as a nuclear facility under construction. Escalation has brought hostilities to levels approaching those seen during the peak of the conflict. Meanwhile, U.S. Central Command said it conducted strikes early Sunday, marking the 8th consecutive night of U.S. operations against Iran. According to CENTCOM, the strikes targeted Iranian coastal surveillance and air defense systems. Sure. You know, just like you wiped out their Navy and you've wiped out most of their system. And they won't have anything left, but yet they're still hitting back hard. So, you know that the U.S. is losing, and that, of course, man, the nose is growing, right? You know, it's time to watch Pinocchio in real time. And so you got this going on because what are the Israelis doing? Are they providing their Air Force? Are they providing their troops? Are they providing anything in this since the U.S. resumed strikes? No! They're just hanging out around the Israeli state and, of course, expanded into Syria and Lebanon. And, of course, why not Gaza? Which is also being turned into U.S. military bases as well as Israeli bases. Because you got to remember, they've already passed a law that merges the militaries together. But the Israelis don't have to even provide anybody anymore. See, you thought that this merge between the Israeli military and the U.S. military, that, okay, Israel's going to put enough of this. No! It just means that the U.S. does their work for them. How's that working out? This racist Israeli law should be renamed death penalty for Palestinians only. Well, yeah, that's what it is. Adoption of this law is a flagrant breach of rights of Palestinian people and violates fundamental rules of international law. Israeli municipal law can also be potentially enforced within territorial space to cover acts performed outside it, notably by the Palestinian Gaza Strip and occupied parts of Lebanon, and in addition to the Golan Heights in Syria. So basically, they can do whatever they want to, right? They've already put in their law. Israeli state has 2 new capital criminal offenses on its books through the adoption of death penalty for terrorist law, DPT. So that includes their extended territories and what they're going into. And like everything else, they just make things up as they go. So, like everything else, the world's sick of them, and that's why it looks like the best is for last, where Russia comes in with its military logistical support, which you already see some logistical support, but you're going to see even more. You see all these places, these allies are already beginning to tell Iran where they're at. So you're starting to see a UN, or what you would call a NATO, a West Asia NATO, coming against Babylon. They're starting to become confederate and giving Esau's locations. So they want them out. They've been wanting them out for years, but they couldn't get them out. Iran's probably the only hope that they got. You could say that, because Bashar al-Assad didn't do much about it. He let them reform. So, you know, pretty much, though, ISIS took over Syria, a.k.a. Hayat al-Sham. They had their way with him because he was too relaxed. You know, unfortunately, he wasn't a good fighter like Iran is. So, Iran is the ghost. And not to mention, Iran was helping Bashar al-Assad fight against those terrorist groups, and even Hezbollah was helping them. So, like everything else, though, they just pretty much, kind of denied Iran's help, even though they had it for so long. They just, pretty much the Syrian Arab army folded once Hayat al-Sham reformed. As you know, Syria fell. So they weren't really trying to fight against the Zionist entity, but everything's changed now that they've gone after Iran. Just like Apostle Tahar said, when they go after Iran, better look out. And he said, where did he say? Yeah, he said it, didn't he? He said that when you see all the troops, they're going to be gathered there in Saudi Arabia. Is Apostle Tahar wrong, or does he understand what's written in the scriptures? You see, everything from apostles on down, we have the 100% truth. So we understand what's going on in the battlefield. Progress. Last week's Rome talks on Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon left the situation without any timetable as Israeli attacks continue. With escalatory strikes against southern Lebanon, all indications are that they're preparing for an open-ended occupation of the region. Israeli state has carried out artillery and airstrikes against the area around Ben Jubal district on Saturday, wounding an unknown number of civilians in the village of Haras, which was the target of substantial artillery fire. See, they're expanding, and then they got that death penalty law. So, that's where their military is. They're not helping the U.S. to fight Iran. Yep. No, it just means that U.S. fights Iran while Israeli military can expand operations here. Oh, and I think that the Israelis are asking for help in, to go after Beirut, too. They're asking the U.S. to send troops there. Israeli military carries out operation in Syria's Kounicha countryside under air cover. So, there it is. Israeli terrorists carried out military operations in the countryside of Syria's Kounicha province early on Sunday, including setting up temporary checkpoint, including civilians and shelling areas near Al-Hamada, where military helicopters flew overhead, local sources told RT. At least around 0300 hours local time, Israeli military copters flew over several areas on the northern countryside of Dara province before heading south, where they continue flying. So they just continue to grab more land, and the new Syrian government ain't doing anything about it. Iran is the only hope for the region, as well as Russia, but they're all going to be aligned eventually, because they're giving up the American positions. Eye for an eye. Yemen's Houthis announced a maritime embargo against Saudi Arabia. There it is. Houthi spokesman vowed to retaliate to the blockade with a blockade and to respond to all escalation with escalation. Meaning that they're going to close that strait very shortly here. Yemen's Houthi movement announced that they are imposing a maritime embargo against Saudi Arabia in response to the recent attack on Sana'a airport. Military spokesman for the Houthis said in a video statement on Monday that the maritime ban against Saudi Arabia will be effective immediately in what he described as an equation of an eye for an eye. Okay, this is just dealing with Saudi Arabia part, but that strait's eventually going to be closed if they continue to escalate. So wait, here we go. The decision by Yemen's Houthis could put new pressure against Saudi Arabia as it's using the east-west pipeline to try to get oil out of the kingdom as the strait remains Iran's chokehold. This pipeline transfers oil to the Red Sea for the kingdom to send further on to its customers. This threat by the Houthis comes after the movement targeted ships for months in support of Palestine against Israeli genocide in the Gaza Strip. So that part of the war is back on. It remains unclear whether the Houthis will keep up the level of attack against Saudi Arabia or if it's a measure to try to pressure the kingdom to concede over local issues as the Yemen war remains broadly frozen in place. So they're just trying to de-escalate, but letting them know, look, man, we'll enforce this blockade if you continue your attacks. So like everything else, though, you know, I got one more here before I close this out, you know, and this is just continuation on the war from Professor Morandi, who's been right about everything so far, you know. So we'll play that in a minute as I get some scriptures here. So here we are, you know, the battle of Armageddon, which means the mountain of troops, multitudes in the valley decision. You know, the day of the Lord Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai is near in the valley decision. That's in Joel chapter 3, but it also talks more about this in Revelation chapter 16. Because, you know, you're seeing that wiping out the U.S. military is getting prepared for the kings of the east, so why not just get to the source? Revelation chapter 16, verse 12. Then the sixth angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up. And we've seen this in our time. You know, the water is not like it was. It's been dried up for some time. So that the way would be prepared for the coming of the kings from the east. You know, so in other words, so that way the militaries could come in. Gog-Magog war, aka Armageddon, you know, which is when their mountain of troops, you know, come in and ultimately destroy Babylon the Great once and for all. Verse 15, behold, I am coming like a thief. In other words, you'll be unaware. Blessed is he who stays awake and who keeps his close, that is, stays spiritually ready for the Most High Yahweh Shai's return, so that he will not be naked, spiritually unprepared, and men will not see his shame. You know, in other words, you know, how we build in our spiritual ark, our spiritual, you know, fortress, if you will, meaning that we're occupied in prophecy and ultimately doing the work of Yahweh Shai. So that way we're protected in that day of trouble, because that's around the corner. And they gathered the kings of the armies of the world together at the place which is in Hebrew called Armageddon, which is that mountain of troops, which is being gathered there now. You know, as we speak, as the U.S. is being chased out, it's being prepared for those kings of the east. So we're watching in real time. So you see where we are on the clock. And like I said, got one more here before I close this out. Then I'm going to say Bracha the Yahweh, Bracha the Yahweh Shai, Ba'Hashem Rakakadash, Wa Abba Babal. Brakatam, Jehovah Elect, Shalom. So here it is, Professor Morandi.
Tonight, the war in the Middle East appears to be entering a dangerous new phase. Just into the newsroom, a senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader says that the U.S. strikes, if they continue for another 2 or 3 days, Iran will enter what he called a phase of full-scale offensive, warning that no political border will be safe. The latest development comes hours after the United States launched another wave of strikes inside of Iran. U.S. Central Command says the attacks targeted command centers, air defense systems, and other military facilities designed to weaken Iran's ability to threaten shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. It's the 7th day of strikes in the country. And it comes after the U.S. also struck bridges overnight, apparently cutting off roadways from Bandar Abbas to Tehran. Iranian officials say at least 7 people were killed. But tonight, it's not that those strikes are gaining attention, not just them. Instead, it's Iran, who responded earlier in the day with what may be its most significant retaliatory strikes in the war. Reports indicate Iran targeted facilities inside Kuwait, including weapons depots, surveillance radars, and per multiple reports, desalination and power generation facilities. Videos emerging online show massive explosions, fires, and even widespread damage. And if those reports are accurate and they're true, these weren't just military targets. They included infrastructure that millions of civilians depend on every single day. And that's a very big deal. Like many of the Gulf countries, like Kuwait, they get about 90% of their drinking water from these desalination plants. Without them, this threatens their daily life. This could be existential for Kuwaitis. At the same time, a separate front is now opening in northern Iraq. Massive fires continue to burn across mountains in Iraq's Kurdistan region after Iranian drone strikes reportedly hit ammunition depots, military facilities, and positions used by U.S.-backed Kurdish forces. Videos show an entire mountainside on fire, with secondary explosions continuing for hours, suggesting large weapon stockpiles were destroyed. New satellite imagery also is beginning to show damage at military installation sites across the region, including Prince Faisal Air Base in Jordan, one of several locations connected to U.S. partners that has now come under attack. It's become increasingly evident that the war is no longer confined to a single country, and it's expanding geographically. And then there's the Strait of Hormuz, right? New shipping data shows commercial traffic has dropped drastically. Only a handful of ships transited in the strait over the last 24 hours. This is a sign that shipping companies are growing increasingly cautious. So when we step back and analyze everything, the clear picture starts to emerge. There's no longer just the United States and Iran exchanging strikes, because the battlefield is now expanding across Iran, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, the Persian Gulf, and one of the most important shipping lanes on Earth. So for months, military analysts have warned about what they call an escalation trap. One side strikes, the other side responds with something a little bit bigger, and then the first side responds again, and each round becomes harder to stop than the last. It continues to grow. So tonight, it looks like we may have entered that next stage. Joining me now to discuss, I'm joined by Professor Mohammad Marandi from the University of Tehran. Professor, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. So to start us off here, I want to talk about Iran. Iran reportedly struck a desalination plant in Kuwait earlier today. So do you think that attacking the water infrastructure, which is a major escalation in this war, is it concerning?
Well, I don't know exactly what was hit, but as you know, the United States has been striking critical Iranian infrastructure. It has been striking desalination plants in Iran, water reservoirs, children's hospitals, bridges, and the Iranians have warned the United States that they will retaliate. Most of these strikes, almost all of these strikes, came from Kuwait. Not all of them, but most of them. And if the Iranians have struck these facilities, it's mostly a warning signal for the Kuwaiti regime and other regimes in the Persian Gulf to stop allowing their territory to be used by the Americans to kill Iranian women.
Absolutely. We have seen a lot of those strikes, or these Gulf states kind of being used as pawns to launch strikes on behalf of the United States military, like you said. So do you think long term that it's realistic that the United States can protect the Gulf countries moving forward for that much longer at all?
No, not at all. If the United States continues, Iran will continue to strike back. If the United States goes after Iran's critical infrastructure, Iran has warned that it will destroy all the critical infrastructure in all of these countries in the Persian Gulf. And this will be carried out in retaliation. First, Iran did not start the war. Iran did not restart the war. And Iran does not target civilians. It does not initiate escalation. But the Iranians have been very clear to the United States. If they continue down the path of targeting ordinary Iranians, we will have no alternative but to strike at those regimes that have allowed this to happen and that have facilitated this. And these regimes will collapse. These are desert regimes. They have nothing but oil and gas. And if their critical infrastructure is destroyed, people will have to leave for Iraq or Yemen, perhaps.
Right. So on that note about the United States and the continuous targeting of civilian infrastructure in Iran, we had the memorandum of understanding that seemingly almost it just collapsed between Tehran and Washington. Washington on its side here in America continues to say Iran wants to make a deal, but then they keep breaking the deal. Iran wants to make a deal, they keep breaking it. What do you think Washington's or Trump's strategy is here with this back and forth?
I don't think any sane person believes the narratives coming out of Washington, especially under Trump. The United States violated every single article in the deal, every single one. They didn't even leave one where they kept their promise. They from the very beginning, they threatened the Iranian leaders and the Iranian people. That's a violation of the deal. They refrained from handing over Iran's stolen assets. Another violation. They removed the sanctions on the Iranian oil exports and then reversed it within days. Another violation. They were supposed to force the Israeli regime to leave Lebanon and to stop the killing. They refused to do that. Another violation. They expanded the sanctions regime against Iran. Another violation. And then they opened a corridor for themselves through the Strait of Hormuz. Even though in Article 5, Iran is to be in charge of normalizing trade through the Strait of Hormuz. Another violation. And then, of course, they reinstated the siege and they bombed Iran. Both violations. They violated everything. And so they're in no position to talk about Iran and its promises.
And now Washington is saying that it wants to charge tolls for its own vessels to go through the Strait of Hormuz and collect for reparations, moving forward. So that's interesting. I want to redirect here. There are growing concerns about the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. How likely do you think it is that shipping going through that waterway could be disrupted? What do you think that would mean or imply for the global economy?
I think we are pretty close to such a situation. The foolish provocation by the Saudis when they bombed the Sana'a International Airport, the capital of Yemen, as an Iranian civilian airline was landing. That foolish act outraged both Iranians, but also, importantly, the people of Yemen. This was an act of war against the people of Yemen, and the Yemeni armed forces retaliated. So tensions are very high between Saudi and Yemen. And at a time when the Strait of Hormuz is shut, if anything happens to Saudi oil installations or tankers, that would make the price of oil go through the roof. And you have to remember that in the previous war that the Saudis imposed on Yemen, what brought an end to that war was when Yemen began to strike Saudi oil assets.
So then I want to say, last question here because we're running out of time. Out of everything that's happened in the last 24 hours, we've had significant strikes, a lot of escalation, confirmed, whether it's confirmed the desalination plant being struck in Kuwait, which is pretty much existential. Most of the Gulf countries can't survive without these desalination plants. But I would also say strategic on behalf of Iran, considering the strikes that, the United States itself has sent. Where do you see the war going from now on? How much longer do you see it, taking place? What do you think would be the largest de-escalate? Is there still a path to de-escalation, actually?
It's all up to the Trump regime. Either if they stop the war, then and they implement their obligations, there's a chance for the global economy to stabilize. The more the United States continues this progression, the closer we get to a global economic depression. If the United States expands the war, I think, and starts targeting Iran's critical infrastructure, I think that a major global economic depression, worse than the 1930s, is inevitable and imminent.
So we could be looking at a global economic depression on the horizon here if things don't stand down. All right, thank you so much for your time, Professor Morandi, and we appreciate you.
Thank you.
Now let's head over to our teams in the Middle East, where they've been covering those tit-for-tat strikes between Washington and Tehran all week. RT correspondent Saman Pajudi filed this report for us, and he continues for team coverage.
The conflict between